Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of
WHOSAY?
So I'm Wyman, I'm one of the hosts today, and together with me we have...
Hello, I'm Michaela. We have two very special guests with us today. Please introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Fazulee. I'm from the Office of Campus Emergency and Security. I'm the Head of Operational Development and Readiness.
I'm Associate Professor Stella Tan. I'm the Associate Provost at the Office of Student Conduct at Provost Office. I'm also the Deputy Officer in charge of NUS NPCC.
So in today's episode, we'll be talking about the topic of vaping, which is a hot topic right now. And it's on the national agenda because we're seeing many cases of vaping coming up. So we'll zoom in on the context of NUS specifically, and we'll talk about the reasons why people vape, the enforcement and deterrence efforts in NUS, as well as the ramifications for vaping.
In terms of policy, are there any differences between like vapes with nicotine, non-nicotine vapes, or just like purely flavored vapes, or for example K-pods? If you get caught like in possession of any of these, are they like treated similarly or are they treated differently?
During any enforcement, when you actually have the vapes in your possession, the thing is, of course, the confiscation part. After the confiscation, then this thing will be actually held in a sealed bag, okay, which will actually be tested whether it's a normal vape or non-vape. But at the point of when you actually capture it, there's no differences. Then there'll be a process whereby they will follow up. So there's actually two, like what you mentioned. One is at the national level, then the other one is within the school itself, or the IHLs. Different IHLs will have different ways of doing it, and we have our own procedures of doing so. Yeah. So for the national level type, okay, I think we all have actually read the thing. How they have actually done it is, if you want to know, the maximum fine is about $2,000. But if it's your first attempt, depending on your age and so on, it'll be about 500 to 700 depending on your age. But the main differences, like you mentioned here, is if it's actually laced with drugs and so on, there is actually a component of rehab that you actually have to attend. And I think in NUS it's also the same. When we actually have found out whether the perpetrator or the person has actually taken just a normal vape or the other part which is laced, yeah, it's also on the rehab part or for the laced part. Yeah.
So in relation to what type of drugs will be found inside vapes, so far we have seen the headlines Etomidate, and that's a more recent class of drugs. And we know that it's already classified as Class C drugs. And in the Singapore law, under the Misuse of Drugs Act, if you look at how they categorize A, B, C, all three categories, they are different in that sense that the severity of the punishment will be different. And we have seen not only Etomidate being laced in the vapes, we also seen other type of hard drugs, and we are talking about, for instance, heroin, ketamine, methamphetamine, cannabis, for instance. And those are Class A drugs, very dangerous and can be very addictive. So the question is, if we, and I say about enforcement officers like Mr. Fazulee and his team at Campus Security, if they come across a vaporizer, a pod-like object, the first question that we usually will ask ourselves is, whose vape? And then the second question is, what's inside the vape? And in fact, that's what our NUS Forensic Science Lab students are working on. Who touched the vape will be important because it can show possession. And fingerprints that are left on the vape can easily be dusted with powders, or we can use UV light source to see the latent prints. We can also see what is inside the vape. And the reason is because if it's Etomidate, for instance, as compared to a vape that has no Etomidate, the punishment will be different, the sanctions will be different. Yeah, and we can use, like, for instance, a handheld Raman spectrometer, and you will shine light and you will see the different carbon bonds inside. The scattering of lights will be different, and with the pics you'll be able to tell on the spot, non-destructive method, whether the pod has been laced with not only with nicotine but with Class C drug like Etomidate or Class A drug like ketamine, for instance. So it's not worth it. Even though we know that, I myself, I was at the Health Sciences Authority yesterday at the enforcement branch. There are many vapes that were placed before my student and I, because we were doing research. The whole room smell, oh wow, it's so sweet, it's just the grape type of smell. And have you come across something like that before?
Yeah, personally, I feel like vapes, they smell very artificial and they have a very sweet smell to it.
You smelled before?
Yeah, because I'm from Malaysia, so like vapes are relatively more common there.
Okay, don't catch him, okay?
I have not consumed vapes before. Oh yes. But on that note, since we have the technology to kind of show possession of vapes, right? Are there any differences between possession of vape and consumption of vapes in terms of policy, in terms of the charges that you get, or in terms of the type of rehab that you have to go through?
Okay, in the current way of enforcement, there is no difference. Once you're caught with a vape, it's assumed that the vape belongs to you. So yeah, the latest part whereby whether it's laced or not, then they'll actually do things like urine tests and all this kind of thing to determine whether you have consumed drugs, per se. Yeah, it's like any other drug consumption. They'll be able to track back whether you actually have consumed that particular thing. Then you'll be charged accordingly, according to the investigation results.
So although currently there's no difference between whether it's possession or consumption, but we do know for sure that if we want to prove consumption, actually the forensic science technology is already available. So for instance, students who are found or anyone who's found to have consumed drugs, the urine test will be able to show the presence of controlled drugs. Even what you eat will be, who you are. Our hair will be able to tell the history of drug consumption. So for instance, in every month, you will have about 1 to 1.5 centimeters growth of hair, and we will be able to chart the history, of drug consumption pattern. And you think about it, this is not the only hairy hair. So not worth it, because first thing, the addictive nature, the harsher penalties, and also there's technology to be able to tell whether a person has consumed or possessed drug. But I think that from at least my point of view, I feel that it's very important to provide the rehabilitative component. And the reason is because if we don't see them as criminals, we see them as someone who can change for the better. And we should see what are the rehabilitative measures that are in store for them to have, like for instance, the cessation, the smoking cessation program, because nicotine itself is already very addictive. Then the other thing will be not only you have to stop it, but in future when you're faced with such situation, then you will be in a position to make a better call. Perhaps the environment around you too. So for instance, in Malaysia, I know that because we went with a big group of student leaders from NUS Hall of NUS, right? Because I'm master of Raffles Hall too. It was really fun at Malaysia, and lots of good food and the vibrancy. But we also witnessed for ourselves that vapes were openly sold everywhere. So maybe you want to share with us your interaction with this in Malaysia.
I know people from Malaysia, the preferred pot of consumption are those flavored pots and not really like nicotine. But although nicotine is also quite big, I feel like vapes are actually an issue around the globe as well. But from what I do know about the acquaintances that I had in Malaysia, the relapse rate is actually quite high. I've known a few people who tried to get off vapes, but then in the end they really couldn't. So it was sort of a situation where they would vape for a bit and then they would try to get it off and then they would relapse. So yeah, it is quite high. So I guess it is indeed a really harsh issue that we should.
Yeah. Maybe I can just come in here at the same time, because we mentioned about overseas experience, maybe even students coming from overseas. So there is actually a harsher punishment actually for foreigners, because there's a chance that you might even be revoked of your pass, your student pass. Yeah, and you'll be actually flown back and even barred when you actually have, I think, third occasion, you'll be actually barred for coming back into Singapore. So I think it's actually a very serious thing for our foreign friends, our foreign students to actually take note, because it's very common that when you pass by the airport, you might actually be caught, and it becomes a serious thing for you. Yeah, it affects your future and so on. I think it is something that is worthwhile to look at.
You know what? Even in NUS also, because if someone is found to be in possession or have consumed vape with, for instance, Etomidate, a controlled drug, then the first-time offender will also be evicted out from the hostel.
Yes.
And if you are a foreigner, if you're evicted out from the hostel, then a big question is where to stay, right? And I think that's why the repercussions is really not worth it.
Then the second part I want to say is, if you're traveling overseas, perhaps you want to experience and stuff like that. But of course, coming back, right, there's always a fear of being again caught or actually tested positive for such things. Yeah, so again, there's a possibility that you'll be taken under the same act as drugs and so on. So it's actually something quite serious.
But
that
actually,
you
we
have
want
consider.
to also tell our students, the local students, whether you are international students or local students, you're treated alike. Yeah, so if even you think about it, even local students who lose their place to stay in the hostel, then where do they go back?
Exactly,
Sometimes
exactly.
they may not even have, the family would have rented out that place. So.
Yeah.
And so why do we have such sometimes I use the word draconian, wherever we think about laws in Singapore on drugs, right, we have zero tolerance, but it's not really draconian in that sense. No, there's a reason why we have harsher laws in place to curb the problem of the day, and this is a rising problem. If we can look at the history, we had such problems in the past, like for example, people who are addicted to opium many years ago. And when they came all over from the world to Singapore to work, they found that that's the only place that they can seek solace, and they were addicted to the opium problem. Later on, we also see gambling problem.
Yeah.
We also see people who are addicted to the internet. There are also see people who are addicted to pornography, and there will be consequences that follow. How about for drugs? Mikila, you're a law student, right? Yeah, I'm also from the law fraternity. So there's a reason why the law must come in at this point in time to solve the problem of the day. So what's your take on this?
As someone who has friends not just in law but outside of law, a lot of reasons as to why people might start vaping in the first place. When you really look at the laws, you have to go back to the reasons as to why people start, right? You want to nip that problem in the bud. Is that there isn't much research around vaping, or so we think. So people start vaping in the first place because they want to kick smoking, or they think it's just a fun social activity. But in reality, there actually is a lot of research, as what Prof. Stella has just mentioned, on vaping itself and the harmful effects of vaping. So I think the law is stepping in now because we're realizing that vaping is actually much worse than it presents, right? Because at the surface level, you think that the vape smells so good, it's so fragrant, like it couldn't do any harm to me. But in actuality, it's really harmful to the body. So I'm pretty sure the government has recognized that and has acknowledged that we need to stop this as early as possible. Because if we look at certain cases, right, people in primary school, as early as the ages of 11, 12, they're already vaping, they're selling vapes to one another.
So it's so accessible.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I think on that topic, Fazulee, in your experience with interactions with students as well, what are some common reasons as to why they would be caught vaping?
Okay, I have to say this is actually from the internet because again, we've done our enforcements and all this, but NUS is actually a very safe place per se. We really don't have this high trend of our student smoking, which is actually a good thing.
That's good.
Okay, but of course from the internet, I've seen that what you mentioned earlier on, trying to quit smoking. Yeah, some people say, hey, actually in the process of cessation, yeah, this vape actually assists me. But again, that's a misconception because some of these vape products actually have a higher content of nicotine. Yeah, yeah, they actually have a higher content of nicotine salt, which actually makes them more addicted to the vape rather than from smoking from a cigarette per se. Yeah, and the other thing is from this high heat of nicotine to your brain, right? It actually, produce more what's the thing called dopamine? Dopamine, yeah, dopamine. So it makes you release stress and happy mood
Actually,
and so on.
you can do that from sports.
Yeah,
Right.
but again, when you do this as a quick hit, especially for students who's under stress, when you have exam and stuff like that, or you have personal problem, this is a getaway for you. Quick hit, just take one. Then we're not even mentioning those that is actually laced with drugs. So again, all these kind of impacts actually assist or give them some withdrawal from the real world. Perhaps that is actually what they're looking for when they actually experiment with this.
I see. And I think a common place for vaping or where vaping might start would be in halls, right? So Prof, could you share, have you seen instances of this starting and roots of vaping communities maybe in hall culture?
Yeah, I've seen the before. I've also seen some cases after 1st of October. Let me explain. Because before 1st October, we didn't have many cases involving drugs that were laced in pods, that were laced in vapes. And so they were just purely nicotine. And punishment then were lighter. And when we found the vapes in the hostel, majority of the time, these were taken from clubs, and in clubs people would be passing things around. Actually, that's also a very dangerous move because when things are being passed around, first thing everyone gets their hand on it, and if you are unsuspecting and you don't know, first thing your fingerprints are already on that. Your DNA will already be on that. And if your friends say, it's harmless, just take a puff, and then you start to take a puff and not realizing that the dose makes the poison. And why I say so is because you won't know what the syndicated manufacturer, and sometimes it's clandestine lab, it's not like pharmaceutical where they titrate the dose. They will just add in, for instance, Etomidate. They dissolve in the solvent. You don't know the concentration, and you don't know the condition that they had, whether it's clean or unclean, contaminated place or not. And things are added into the vape without you knowing the dosage. And that's very dangerous, number one. And number two, you have seen on the internet that people, after taking vapes, they will get a very bad effect, and some of them walk about like as if they are zombies. And that's because suddenly the drug controls our mind. And that's the very scary part. And why is it that there's this addictive nature? Everyone says, I can control myself. I can don't take that. But you just take, for instance, a very simple analogy, besides what I mentioned earlier on gambling, for instance, and all this, right? It's like coffee, caffeine. You will want to have more and more, right? You say that I want to stay awake more. And then you realize the tolerance is going to be very different. So the danger part, you don't know what it will do to you. You think that you are in control, but then you start to lose control. And once you lose control of your mind, then you will not be incapacitated. You will not be able to enjoy the things in life. You will not be able to wake up and say, I am going to work, I'm going to do internship, I'm going to do something like a podcast at 7:30 a.m. like us. Right? Because you will feel the down when there's high in life because of the dopamine and all these release, right? There will always be down because what goes out will come down. And that crashing down is the most scary part because then you'll feel depressed, you'll feel isolated. And the worst thing is, you will feel that you cannot find help because if you find help, you say, I'm going to seek help on the door, and everybody will say, I'm criminal. And then what do we do? So that's why we cannot say that at the end of the day, you are on your own because you have committed an offense. We must say that at the end of the day, we know that you have committed an offense. This is the starting point. Let's start to wean you off. Let's start to clean you up. And let's start to make a difference. Be an ambassador like our NUS MPCC. Walk around telling everyone, say, don't make the wrong choices. And why? Because once you make the wrong choice, you may be in this, but if you know that there's help available, go to our University Health Center. We have very good doctors over there, and our university counseling services. We have good psychologists and counselors, right?
Yeah.
And they will be able to walk you through because, at the end of the day, we have seen very successful cases.
Okay, maybe I can interject at this point. A very interesting point by Prof. Stella on the rehab part. Okay, how to assist them is if a student finds himself that I want to make a change, I want to stop vaping and don't know how to do it. The first thing you can do is you can actually do a surrender. Okay, how to actually do this is you can actually approach any security guard on campus saying that I want to surrender my vape. From then on, the security guard will actually start the process. Your details will be taken, and after that, there will be a follow-up on the cessation program itself also, right? So this is something that we can do if, let's say, you're interested in making a change in that sense.
So the bottom line here is really don't even think about starting vapes, right? But then we mentioned earlier that hostel suspension is one of the consequences. But if we do a quick check on the NUS anti-vaping website, you see that there are many other kinds of repercussions or consequences. Withdrawal of student privileges, including leadership roles, community service hours, conduct records, right? Disciplinary records. So what exactly is NUS doing in terms of deterrence to actually prevent students from even ending up in this situation to begin with?
Okay, for NUS, we do have a joint inspection program with HSA, the Health Science Authority of Singapore. Yeah, so far the checks has been concentrated on residentials and halls. Yeah, we have about 20 of them planned already, and I think about a few of them already started. Okay, and good news is so far we've been clean.
Oh, clean.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
all
good.
clean. Okay, very well done on our record sheet. But this will continue, all right? And we also have another program whereby our campus emergency security actually partners together with student leaders.
Like
NPCC,
NPCC.
yeah, and NUSU. Then we actually go around to actually first educate people, let them know of opportunities like surrendering that we mentioned and so on. At the same time, also maybe gather information about hotspots, whereby maybe places whereby you see people smoking and so on, so we can take some further action on those. So it's a very proactive program that the university is doing. And on a passive note, I think this is something done by all IHLs. The security officers are always there patrolling around, but they're not actively looking for this, but it's part of the parcel of making the campus safe. Yeah, keeping safe of the community.
For students who are worried about surrendering their vapes because they think that the school will report them to the police or some legal repercussions will ensue, right? What happens then? Like, is that something that would deter them?
Okay. Maybe I can be very clear. If you are coming forward to
On your
surrender,
own to
on your own
surrender,
surrender, not being caught in the process of vaping or in possession, the treatment is different because you surrendered. So again, it is really the cessation and all these kind of action that will be coming in. Yeah, not really on the enforcement type of all punishment.
It has to be done on their own accord.
They're done on their own accord. They're coming forward.
So after this podcast, we should put a big brand over here that's help available, and there should be a hotline for them or a website that they can go to. So very quickly, not only they can seek help, but they can be good ambassadors for others too. So I want to go back on one point. You talk about education, right? I really like that. I always believe that prevention is better than cure. And in terms of the education part, I feel that in law, we always say that there's a deterrent effect. I'm asking also to both students over here, Michaela and also Waiman, do you feel that there's a deterrent effect when we have this published on our anti-vaping website to say that, for instance, privileges will be withdrawn if you're found to have vapes with controlled drug like Etomidate? And these privileges can be something that's well sought after, for instance, going on student exchange program. Yeah, what do you think?
I don't think it has a certain deterrence effect, right? Because, for example, being barred from co-curricular activities, I feel like co-curricular activities are sort of like integral to student life. They make for a meaningful student life. They make for meaningful memories here at NUS. And furthermore, like being barred from student exchange programs, right? It's sort of like a once in a life opportunity to go abroad and stay abroad for many students here. So being barred from those opportunities really makes students feel like they've lost something quite tremendous to them. So I think that is why I do believe that it does play a deterrence effect.
But you're year 4, right?
Yes.
And if you're in year 4, you probably don't need to go for any more student exchange program. You have already gone. If you're not staying on campus, then what other things do you think that will work to make a person think twice or thrice? Because that's the reason why we have this, right? To say that you need to think thoroughly before you act.
I think one of the consequences that Michaela raised just now is that you would have a permanent record on your student transcript, right? So for people who are graduating like myself, having a permanent record on a transcript might bar you from certain job opportunities, for example, which are sort of the thing that most students look out for when they're trying to graduate.
Actually, it's not a permanent part on the student transcript. These are only for sanctions that are, for instance, suspended from NUS. So it will be notarized on the transcript, and this will be there for 3 years after a person graduated. That is if a student has been on suspension. But if a student is not on suspension, the student's record will also be with NUS records, disciplinary records, and that's forever, So it's not worth it, right?
Yeah, so I think one single puff has lifetime consequences, so it really isn't worth it to seek that one instance of enjoyment and really have a permanent record on something that you've worked your whole life for.
Yeah, why is it that there's like so much problems that we hear about, even though we don't have problems on campus recently, but we do know that there are students who have been arrested because they were found vaping outside campus. Yeah, and recently we also saw on the headlines, even though they are not from NUS, But we have also seen some of them, they are playing lab mouse and they have their own clandestine lab and they start to manufacture their own vapes that contain controlled drugs. Why do you think that do you have peers around you that you hear about that are they facing a lot of stress in life? Is that the reason why they are looking for an outlet to ventilate?
Personally, luckily, I don't know anyone who vapes, and I don't have anyone in my close circle or extended circle who does so. But I would think that from a Gen Z's perspective, you might think that life is short. I want to try all these things because it seems cool. My friends are doing it, so I'll do it as well. Or like if, for example, you're in a social setting and all your friends are vaping outside, you're the only one sitting inside. That looks a bit lame, right? You're like, okay, I'm left out. So you do it just to fit in, or you do it because of peer pressure. But I think what I urge people our age to think about is also, if you're not looking at a disciplinary record, if you don't think about the repercussions in school, think about your health in the long run, right? This is such a hard addiction to kick. In the long run, are you going to be looking for other ways to get that high, or get a hit of dopamine if it's not for vaping, right? Once the government cracks down on vaping, are you going to look for other vices as well? So I think that is especially where deterrence comes in, enforcement comes in, and on this front, that's really, really impactful, right? So I think on that note, if we're looking at other alternative options for people who want to kick that habit, what other kinds of methods can they look at?
Maybe I just add on here because we mentioned peer pressure. Actually, peer pressure works both ways. It can be for positive and negative. So what we see a very great encouragement thing that we see from our own student population here is a lot of students are coming up to actually assist us for the joint inspections and so on. And just to add on, tomorrow we have a session for student ambassadors, people who volunteer to come out and actually learn about this, how to help each other, how to propagate the message and so on. Yeah, so this is something that I see the community of students helping themselves. And I think Prof. Stella would also know and also say that, yeah, we've seen the effectiveness of student to student kind of propagation of the message. Yeah, it's really helpful to be able to speak to your own cohort and relate your problems to them and knowing, hey, actually there's a way out. Yeah, how do I actually get out of this and improve myself and so on. Yeah.
We have seen the negative part of peer pressure in some of the disciplinary cases that came before the Board of Discipline. And this is the larger problem actually, because the vape is a vessel that contains controlled drugs, right? For those like that we say Etomidate, ketamine, methamphetamine, heroin. But we're also talking about hardcore drugs like heroin, methamphetamine, ketamine, cannabis, etc. And the thing is that very usual the modus operandi will be they are in a group setting. And like what Michaela say, sometimes they are being forced to do something because they want to be in the group than out of the group. So you think about it, have we ever been in a situation like that sometimes, that we say that, let's not be a party spoiler, and then we do that. But that's the reason why all the more the law should come in. Then you have a reason to help you weigh and see the consequences. If you stay with your team and your group and say, let's not be a party spoiler, but then if you turn out to be the positive one and say, let's not do it, because there are other ways to ventilate, there are other ways to de-stress. Like I say, pick out a sport, let's go out and play soccer, basketball, let's go and sing karaoke together. Those are the healthy habits that student leaders in our hall, Raffles Hall, we engage them. We even say, let's go Resort World and have a Halloween night, and just find other outlets rather than go for the vices. And if you think about the student ambassadors in MPCC, this one group, but we also have student ambassadors from the different hostels and also from clubs, right? And why is it that students want to do this? And I can tell you that it's not like they don't have anything better to do. From a student point of view, your curriculum is already so packed. You have like 13 intensive weeks per semester, and everyone is fighting the headlines of the newspaper, fighting for internships, multiple internships, looking for a lot of these opportunities to distinguish yourself from others. So the question that I always ask ourselves, why is it that we've managed to draw like-minded people, a community to help the community? And I feel that it's because NUS care, and we genuinely care for people around us. And I want to ask the students, if the professors come out to you and say, hey, don't vape, it's not fun, it's not cool. Then it's like, this professor may not be understanding the problem of the day, not Gen Z, right? Not Gen Z now. But if someone who's your peer, your age, comes up to you, how do you feel about that? Is there a better connection? Or do you think that it's just a show and tell, it's just an artificial thing?
I think it's definitely, you can see that the message around vaping is getting stronger, right? But when your friend actually tells you, this is a problem and you need to address it, you start to reflect and you start to see, actually, yeah, if my loved ones, people who care about me, can recognize that this is an issue, why am I not able to do that? And I think when you actually sit down and have a heart-to-heart conversation with a friend maybe or family member, then you start to realize that the issue is not just affecting you sometimes, it affects the people around you. And I think that could be one of the reasons why a lot of people do end up kicking that habit and stopping vaping before it gets worse, because you must also look at the repercussions right around you and the environment as well, the impacts on your environment. How about you?
I agree with what Michaela said, right? If people that I care about come and call me out on my actions, I would definitely feel that the situation is way worse than I think it actually is. So I guess the point is to flip peer pressure on its head, right? Instead of using it for negative change, instead of the in-group being like, hey, let's vape, make the in-group be, let's not vape.
Yeah. Let somebody be the change maker. Someone in the group will say, let's not do this. Just like in COVID times, right? Do you remember that there's a lot of social gathering?
Yeah.
And wherever someone says, no, this is not correct, this is the mischief that the law seeks to curb then is to make sure that there's no spread of COVID virus, right? And so the same thing, if there's somebody who's the positive one and say, that's the problem that we are going to face, because if every one of us take a puff, then it will, first thing, your fingerprints and DNA are on the pot and very easily found out. Secondly, then it's in your system and you will start to be a slave to that. And you wouldn't want that, because we should have autonomy in our own life rather than to be a slave to a controlled drug or controlled drugs.
For me, real friends or even a real community will engage in peer support rather than peer pressure. So we'll actually support each other to actually achieve greater things in life rather than go down that beaten path.
That's true. A lot of us are scared, I think, in social settings to be that one, as Prof has mentioned, like that party pooper. And why are you spoiling everyone's fun by calling them out on something that doesn't even affect you? But I think at the end of the day, real friends do care. And if you care about your friends, you will let them know that this is not a very healthy thing to be developing. And at the end of the day, it's your health at risk.
And that was a really nice way to wrap up today's episode. Thank you to our very lovely guests today here who've kind of talked about the reasons why people vape and sort of some of the consequences that we might face if we take a puff of vape. So coming up next episode, we'll be focusing on what are some resources that people might need when they are thinking of quitting vaping, right? Sometimes a lot of people, they want to quit, but they don't really know where to go or who to find. So that's what we're going to be discussing next episode, and that's a sneak peek for everybody here.
Right.
Okay, and that's all we have for today. Thank you all for coming on WHOSAY. And follow our socials for more, and stay tuned for our next episode of
WHOSAY!
Follow our socials, stay tuned for another episode of WHOSAY!